Nick, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Sal. It's great to be back.
It's been a little while. For our audience who's unfamiliar with you, could you give a little background before we get into the real fun stuff?
Yeah, quick and dirty. Worked in pharma and biotech for about 20 years, biochemical engineer by education. Eventually got tired of the corporate game and had already been in the biohacking, optimization, peptide space for about 10 years at that point. And decided to go do the entrepreneurial thing. And, my first love was essentially the optimization, biohacking, the bleeding edge stuff. So started with skincare and then moved on to all these other fun things.
Anything in particular that drew you to that? Was it like a personal story, or did you follow anybody in particular? Or what drew you to that?
Yeah, so actually, personal health challenge. Before I had kids, I was really into extreme sports. Had a nasty downhill mountain bike crash. They had to take out a big chunk of the cartilage in the bottom of my shoulder and didn't have much, use, mobility, range of motion of the arm after that. And the common answer was, you're stuck like that until you want a joint replacement. And that was the wrong answer. Already knew the space, so dug in, did my homework, and this was around 2006, before peptides were even really known out of very small circles.
Right.
And the only two answers I came up with that were probably legit were stem cells or peptides. And with stem cells, you're probably looking at multiple treatments, and then, as in now, that's expensive.
Very.
$10,000, $20,000 a pop. Way too rich for my blood, especially, just about to have young kids. So said, let's go the peptide route. And being in the field I was in, I knew labs. I knew guys. It was easy for me to basically get a hold of this stuff without needing third-party websites. So did some homework, came up with a protocol, and it took about a year. But within about a year, I had regained full use of my shoulder, and it was all the way down the rabbit hole after that.
Wow.
That was the moment.
Yeah, I gotta give you credit for something. So a while ago, I don't know if you remember, we did a podcast with you, and you talked about the peptide GHK-CU. You had said you had gotten really sunburned, and people could see here you have the skin complexion of Justin.
Yeah.
And you said that you had used GHK-CU on your skin, and the sunburn was like gone. I had a family friend or family member, I should say, that was visiting, also very light complected. We had gone to Santa Cruz, and poor girl, she got totally sunburned. And I had some GHK-CU, cream, the ones you guys provide from Entera. And I'm like, here, try this. And it was gone the next day.
Yeah.
It was wild.
I did the same thing with Max too after a sunburn. Incredible how well it works.
Pretty effective.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. It's like literally, it was sunburn where you're like, this is going to blister. Gone the day after. What's happening with the GHK-CU that's making that transition so quick?
Yeah, it's really cool. So essentially what happens is you're out in the sun. I'm out in the sun too long. Most of you guys are probably okay for a while. A sunburn is not an on or off thing like a switch. So you have excessive UV exposure, and what excessive is varies from person to person and skin type. But once you have excessive UV exposure, it essentially causes a reactive oxygen species, ROS, and other signaling cascade in the cells that basically start the damage cascade. So once you come in, you still don't have a full sunburn. So, think about it. You were out for too long. You can come in, you may be a little bit pink, right? But you're not sore yet. It doesn't hurt yet. That may be hours in the next day because it takes that long for the essentially inflammation and damage signaling cascade to develop to cause all that to occur.
Oh, that makes sense.
GHK essentially interrupts that signal and says, hey guys, cut that crap out. Let's just go straight to repair and not worry about everybody losing their mind because of UV exposure.
Okay, so because that's what happened. We came home, she was super red. I'm like, this is going to blister. Put it on, gone the next day. So it interrupts that, the damage, goes straight to healing.
Yep.
Right out the gates.
And here's another cool thing is if you apply it before you go out, even just a little bit, it actually makes you more resistant to that signaling cascade being started because it preconditions the cells into a repair and regenerate state instead of I'm just chilling and something might make me upset and go into a damage cascade.
Is
We'll
there
have to try that.
Are there benefits? Because GHK-CU, I put it in the same category in terms of like regenerative, like BPC-157, thymosin beta. Is there benefit for performance-oriented people, or is it mainly just for like skin health and the way your skin looks?
Topically, it's going to be aesthetic for the most part. If you're getting into sub-Q, definitely. So, I'll give you an example. My son plays soccer competitively. So if you you're talking huge strain on the ligaments and tendons, especially in the knees, right? So and obviously you'd have to be aware of WADA and where you're playing and the rules involved. But if the rules allow for it, you could use it almost like BPC. Hey, 3 times a week, I'm going to do a sub-Q injection in the top of my knee, right below my knee, just so you're never building up that excess, essentially wear and tear or stress damage to reinforce the ligaments. Because this is a simplification, but essentially what it's doing is at the molecular signaling level and actually at the DNA level with GHK-CU, it's keeping the cells in a repair regenerate state.
Okay. Is there ever a risk of down-regulating your own production of a peptide because you're using a peptide?
There is, but it's generally, for most peptides, it's when you get to extreme levels.
Okay.
The ones, and I'm kind of making up a number here, just order of magnitude. For GHK-CU, the highest dose study I'm aware of is 50 milligrams IV. Like that's a bomb
That's
on
insane.
your system. Right.
Because a normal sub-Q dose would be what?
A lot of people will do less than 1 milligram. If I use it, I usually do 5 milligrams, honestly.
Wow. So even if you did 1 milligram a day, that's 7 milligrams a week versus 50.
It's 1/10 of what.
Correct. A lot of peptides are like that. You know, they TB500 is another one. A lot of people will dose, partially because it's expensive as well, but you know, maybe 500 micrograms, maybe a milligram. And we've talked about this before, but if you really dig into it and experiment with it, the magic of TB500, its regenerative properties really shows up around 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams. And most people are like, oh my God, like, you know, that's going to hurt me. You can go, there's a few human studies, but there are actually quite a few animal studies. And if you do the dose conversion from the animals to the human, the potential problematic dose is somewhere around 1 gram.
Oh yeah, you're not going to get that.
And if you just apply, even a huge safety factor, and divide that by 10, like who's gonna, just from a cost perspective, who's gonna be injecting 100 milligrams of TB500? Like that's your car.
Right. Now, with peptides, and I want to get to bioregulators. That's really what I want to get, but I don't want to. I want to stay on peptides here for a second. When you're using certain peptides, are the ones that you're probably not a good idea to use at the same time? And I'll give you an example because I had this experience myself. There's 2 peptides that are regarded, and correct me if I'm wrong, as mitochondrial function enhancers, or they help with the mitochondria function of the body. SS31 and MOTS-C, but they both work very differently. I took them both in one day once, and I did not like the way I felt. And I was told it's not a good idea to use both at the same time. If you're going to use them at different times. So did I make a huge mistake? Are there peptides you shouldn't combine? Like what happened there? Or was I just placebo?
You didn't make a huge mistake. It's actually a fascinating point that there's very little discussion.
Okay.
And there's another peptide related to the reason behind this that I'm about to get into. And that one is CJC.
Okay.
So you guys have probably heard people use CJC and like, oh, I got a reaction or I felt weird, right?
Sure. That's the growth hormone releasing one or whatever, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So the reason that's happening is both MOTS-C. So let's start with MOTS-C. You have histamine receptors in your body that cause a histamine response.
Sure.
So MOTS-C, its molecular structure fits the histamine receptors shockingly well.
Okay.
So for instance, I can't do MOTS-C. I would love to do MOTS-C. Like I have literally tried 1 microgram and I break out in hives.
Oh yeah.
And
Doug got a reaction to MOTS-C, I think, right? When you did it sub-Q, you got like a red spot. Yeah.
so if you ever get a reaction from it, probably clinicians who'd yell at me for this, do 5 milligrams of KPV.
Okay.
Because the signaling cascade that triggers in the histamine reaction, the peptide KPV shuts it down.
Okay.
So inject
Offsets.
1 milligram to 5 milligrams in the same spot, like as soon as the reaction starts, and it shuts it right down.
Okay.
So circling back to your question, what's going on there is, and this is a very rough correlation, the more fair you are, and as to why, I mean, that's probably a wide open debate, but the more fair you are, the more likely you are to have these sorts of reactions.
Okay.
Just think more rolling in the grass. Fair people are more likely to get itchy and all that from rolling in the grass than somebody with a darker skin tone. So, as a very, very crude rule of thumb, the darker your skin tone, the less reactive you're going to potentially be to any of these.
Okay.
In your case, you used MOTS-C. So
and combine it with SS at the same time.
right. So what happens is your body can react to almost any peptide. A foreign molecule is coming in, even if your body normally makes it, it's floating around in a way it wouldn't normally be.
Right. It's all boom in one spot suddenly.
Right.
Okay.
So, that can increase vigilance of your immune system. Whoa, what's going on over here? Maybe I need to start paying attention and check it out, which is, think of that as the beginning stage of a histamine reaction, like feeling weird or itchy. So, in your case, your body tolerates it well enough where you don't get a histamine reaction. It's just kind of like, hold on, I'm a little nervous right now. So now when you bring in SS31, well, it's already on the lookout for something that it wouldn't normally be there.
Okay.
So now you get a reaction to SS31 when you wouldn't normally get it.
Okay. Okay. So it was okay to combine them because I felt kind of shaky and a little like, is my mitochondria producing too much energy or is it overloaded? I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's a possibility, but from my experience and just the reading I've done on it,
Okay.
Unless you're getting into really high doses of those, it's almost entirely likely it's more related to a histamine response.
Interesting.
Could have been one of the other 100 things you take too.
Well, no.
It's like, I love how
it could totally
I'm pretty
be-
sure these two things did it. Never mind the
And
others.
it could also be the higher doses that I tend to mess with. But no, that's not what I did. Today's program giveaway is MAPS Aesthetic. If you want to win, leave a comment below this video. The first 24 hours that we drop it, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. If you win, we'll let you know in the comments section. Also, MAPS 15 minutes is half off. Head over to maps15minutes.com. Use the code MUSCLE50 for that discount. If you're interested in some of the stuff that Nick is talking about, his skincare company, or the one he works with, is Entera Skincare. So you can check them out at enteraskincare.com/mindpump. And then the bioregulators, you can head over to probr.com/mindpump. Back to the show. All right, let's talk about bioregulators. Let's talk about the history of them. And then I'd like to get into what's different about them, because they're still considered peptides, but they're different than traditional peptides.
Yeah, that's going to be a great point. That's one reason there's so much confusion around it.
Okay, so what's the history of them? So from what I'm familiar, I can't remember his name. There was a doctor or scientist who developed them and used them in Russia. So what's the history of them, and are they currently being used anywhere, like on a prescription basis?
Yeah, so the guy you're talking about is Dr. Khavinson.
That's it.
So go back to the Cold War, the 60s, the 70s. Russia had somewhat been cut off from Western medical technology. They needed to kind of go their own route, develop their own homegrown stuff. A small sidetrack that we have to do to really understand this difference is the U.S. and Russia take fundamentally different approaches to essentially all technology. The West essentially takes what you could call a regulatory approach of, all right, what are the rule sets for me to discover something, validate it, develop it, and move it into the marketplace. So those are my steps.
Yeah.
Russia takes the inverse. So in the West, like, all right, let's follow the proper rule sets to find something cool that works, test it the right way at an early stage, and now let's start going into people and see what happens.
Right.
Russia pretty much does the opposite. Russia says, we have a problem, we need a solution. So what's going to work? So you don't just put random stuff into people, even in Russia. But they'll have their Uber lab nerds come up with some stuff and like, hey, it worked on a few dogs, it worked on a few mice. Great, go straight to people. So in the West, you're spending huge amounts of time and money figuring out the exact modality of a tool. How do you apply this in what case and what manners? In Russia, find something that works and then put it into, we'll say, the marketplace or whatever form that takes, whether it's the military or consumers, and then let's figure out how best it fits there. So they're essentially inverse approaches.
Okay.
So coming back, now that we explained that, 60s, 70s in Russia.
This is during the Soviet Union too, so I got to imagine that they're even more that way. This is like they're just going to, okay.
Yep. So they said, hey, we need to develop medical technology. Their primary interest was for their soldiers. Secondary was the public medical stuff, athletes. So found one of their big brains, who happened to be Khavinson, basically put him in the military in a military research institution and said, go figure it out. However you want to do it, go figure it out. So he'd been looking into organ extracts and things like that for a while and noticed that, hey, organ extracts taken from one animal can help another. So went down that route, started doing all his experimentation.
Is that glandular therapy? Is that what that was referred to?
Yep.
Okay.
And that was the original founding of bioregulators, because through his work, he found that you could take these purified organ extracts, give them to soldiers, and this is how they were testing them, and their endurance would increase, their recovery would increase, their stress tolerance would increase. So, oh, cool, now we have stuff, and they just ran with it. And, they keep him doing his work, in his lab, and he just kept refining it. So I'll jump ahead a little bit here. So with bioregulators, you're generally going to see 3 different types referred to, which is part of the confusion as well. You'll see cytamins, cytamaxes, and cytogens. They're all bioregulators. And you'll see names used interchangeably too, because as we talk about it, we'll refer to it in terms of organs: heart bioregulator, bone bioregulator. But you'll see different names out there. So, for instance, blood vessel, you'll see Vesugin for heart. You'll see kiloheart. Those are really trade names, brand names,
okay.
not structural names, not product names. So, Khavinson kept doing his work and said, "Great, I can take this gross extract, just a bucket of liquid extract, essentially, right? And it's got a ton of stuff in here. It's a soup of molecules, and it works. That's cool. But being an accomplished scientist, well, what parts in there are doing the magic?" So over time, he just honed in, and basically the easiest way to explain it is filtered it more and more and more to figure out what exact molecules were doing what. That's where the difference between cytamin, cytamax, and cytogens come from. So cytamins you can think of as sort of the broad soup of an organ tissue extract. So generally speaking, bioregulators are a subclass of peptides, but in most cases, bioregulators are anywhere from about 2 to 7 amino acids. So I know most of your audience knows this, but to understand the difference between an amino acid, a peptide, and a protein, you think of Legos, and the difference is how many are clicked together. If you have 3 to 5, 3 to 7 Legos clicked together, that's functionally a bioregulator. One Lego brick by itself is an amino acid.
Okay.
And once you get over about 50 Lego bricks clicked together, now you're a peptide, and they act differently because in biology, size and shape also impacts how they behave in the body and what they can do.
Okay. When you're saying like these extracts, are they just taking like a thymus and making it so you could just take that and inject it, or are they actually looking at, like you said, what they're looking for is what's doing the thing? What is it that they're finding? They're finding these short peptides that seem to do what exactly? When it's called a regulator, what does that mean?
So I'll give you the crude overview of essentially how they were originally made. You take an organ, you throw it in a blender, you blend it up really well, and then you put it through a series of filters so that everything above a certain molecular size is filtered out.
Okay.
So now you're left with, to be frank, because I've done this in a lab, a weird colored liquid that smells really bad. Okay. And it's all those bioactive molecules.
Okay.
Like organs don't usually smell good, like if you've ever been around a butcher or anything like that. To the next question, what are they doing? This is actually a really important question and actually really fascinating. So, to keep this from being confusing, I'll just clarify. When I say peptide, I'm referring to the common peptides most people know that you would inject: BPC, TB500, so on and so forth. Bioregulator is going to be these molecules, which are generally 7 amino acids or less. So with peptides, you get into another area of confusion here because you hear the constant debate. You can't use peptides orally because they'll get broken down by your stomach and they're mostly useless.
Now it's just amino acids.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's a true statement. Bioregulators can be taken orally. And when you tell people that, they're like, no, you can't, because you just told me if I take it, my stomach's going to break it down.
I got to pause right there. That we had Dr. Seeds on the show, and that was his critique of a bioregulator orally. Is that you're just going to destroy it in the gut, so it's a waste of time.
So there's published papers on this, and there's a very clear answer, mechanistic answer that explains it. So the main enzyme that chops proteins up, whether it's a steak or TB500, if you were to take it orally, is pepsin. It's running around like a pair of scissors in your stomach, just chopping all the proteins and peptides up. Generally speaking, pepsin does not attach well to molecules, to bioregulators, to peptides that are less than about 7 amino acids. Because this is a loose explanation, but you essentially need a large enough molecular area for it to attach to and start chopping stuff up. So once you're under about 7 amino acids, it's going to be chopped up a little bit without question, but it isn't going to get completely destroyed. BPC 157 is, I believe, about 50 amino acids. So BPC 157, let me use a better example.
Yeah, because that one's orally bioavailable.
A little bit. So TB500, so actual thymosin beta 4 is a very large molecule.
Okay.
TB500 is a fragment of it.
Right.
But even that fragment is still a very large molecule. Somebody will probably correct me here. I believe it's about 40 amino acids.
Okay.
40 amino acids is getting sliced and diced up, down, left, and right by pepsin. So you can't really go any smaller than that fragment of the full thymosin beta 4 molecule and have it be active. So once that 40 amino acid block starts getting chopped up, like, you're done.
Okay.
Game over. So the second piece to this is you have a transporter in the lining of your gut called Pept1. Pept1 directly essentially latches on to amino acid chains, peptides, but only ones that are about 7 amino acids or less. So you have direct transport pathways, active pathways, out of your gut into your bloodstream for bioregulators. You don't have that for peptides. Peptides have to go all the way through digestion and then try to pass through the gut lining.
And there's no passing through the liver, anything like that. How does it get to the bloodstream?
So they're still going to go through the liver.
Okay.
And you will get additional degradation there.
Okay.
It's not a huge number of studies. There are a handful of degradation studies out there on peptides. And, these are, I'll say, educated estimates. It's not like there's 500 papers so you can say a hard number. But realistically, when you take a bioregulator orally, you're probably getting somewhere 10 to 30% into systemic circulation.
Okay.
And you can get to that number a few different ways. There are some degradation studies. There are also actually a number of radioisotope labeling studies. So they take one of these molecules and they make part of it radioactive, essentially.
They tag it.
Yep. Yeah, you put it in a rabbit, a dog, a monkey, and you look at where it goes. They've done that with multiple of them, and based on where it's going, you can now make legitimate calculations that to see this much radiation around the body, you had to have at least this much of the stuff get all the way through digestion and into the body.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. When your body breaks down amino acids, each amino acid does something on its own. You have a complete protein that does something differently. When you're taking these chains that are 7 amino acids long, let's say, or less, that has a particular signaling process in the body. It knows where to go, essentially. Essentially,
and that, to me, this is actually the coolest thing about bioregulators that I actually don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about, at least any of the podcasts I've listened to. So let's take a step back. How do peptides work? When you take a peptide, it's essentially looking for a receptor. Right. So let me hit that receptor, and a peptide is essentially ramping something up, generally speaking, above baseline function. So if a certain function in your body, repair and regenerate, microvascular growth, even if you're, the pinnacle of health and you're operating at 100%, if you take BPC, it's going to improve your microvasculature. Right, it's going above 100%. Bioregulators don't work like that. Bioregulators don't work through the receptors. So bioregulators are freaking fascinating because what they do is they have to go through digestion, as we just spoke about. They end up in primary circulation, and then they go directly into the cell. There's a few ways they can do it. They can do it through diffusion. They can do it through being actively pulled into the cell through a few different mechanisms. And so they can go into pretty much any cell for the most part. But yeah, when you say 7 amino acids, I think a lot of people will be like, well, you're not going to have many combinations that you can have.
Right.
It's actually a massive number, because if I won't go down this road to calculate it, it's an exponential function.
Yeah.
It's like 5 times 5 times 5 times 5.
Right,
So
right.
it's a huge number.
Yeah, you can organize 7 in a lot of different ways.
Right. So what happens is, especially in smaller molecular structures, charge structure becomes very, very important. If you get into like all the lipid nanoparticle technology, which is like all the rage lately, it's the same thing. It's entirely dependent on charge structure to be able to deliver it to something. So bioregulators, in a sense, are working at the same level of like what we just now have as like cutting edge technology as to how they home in. So they get to a cell, does it have the right charge? Certain cells have different charges on the outside, so they're going to be more likely to be accepted by certain cells depending on their charge structure and their amino acid structure.
Match.
When they go into the cell, they're actually small enough to pass into the nucleus. So now once they're in the nucleus, they actually directly interact with either or both DNA directly or histones, molecules related to the DNA. So bioregulators are directly signaling the DNA.
And what are they doing? Because the peptides signal specific things. Bioregulators, I'm assuming the regulator part of it means it's just making it it's optimizing its function, up, down, depending on what the cell needs.
Right. So that's why I brought up what peptides do before. To put it into one soundbite here, peptides focus on receptors, which are generally on the outside of tissues, outside of cells, and ramp it up over 100%. Bioregulators go to the nucleus and interact with DNA or histones to tell them to go to their baseline homeostasis state.
Okay. Wow. So you have a liver, let's say that's operating suboptimal or sub-baseline. It's dysfunctional. Let's say you got some elevated liver enzymes, maybe a little fatty liver disease, whatever.
Yep.
A bioregulator will go in there and tell the cells, hey, let's get back to operating optimally. And you see improvements essentially.
Right. So interestingly, there is a slight overlap in function in GHK-CU and bioregulators, because GHK-CU absolutely works through a wide array of receptors. But GHK-CU also can signal to the DNA to shift back to homeostasis.
Okay.
There may be others. It's actually the only peptide I'm personally aware of that actually does that. So it's very unique in that sense. But that's exactly how bioregulators work, and that brings up another difference, which causes more confusion on bioregulators. You take peptides like, hey, I messed up my knee or my shoulder or whatever, right? I'm going to go use BPC and TB500. Hey, some people are like, I feel a difference in a day. Some people are a week, but if you're using it right, you're going to feel it. No question within a week, usually within a few days. Bioregulators are slow and steady because they're never ramping it over 100%. So they're just saying, let's go back to our baseline health state, homeostasis. So that is a slow and steady operation. And the majority, I'll say probably in the majority of cases, you're usually not going to have an overt subjective effect of, oh, wow, I feel that.
Right.
There are two easy examples that are exceptions to that. One is in men's health. As men age, due to hormonal balance, even if you're optimized, TRT and all this and all that.
You're just older.
Right. Morning erection in men is a very easy, very obvious sign of hormonal health. And, that also gets into vascular factors and all that. And, as we age, whether it's, women know this because they're husbands, men know this because they live it. As you age, you're not waking up every morning having to be careful to roll over,
right.
Even if you're absolutely optimized. So if you take testes and prostate bioregulator, and the perfect stack for basically men's sexual health would be testes, blood vessel, and prostate. If you take those three, most guys within a week, some guys 2 weeks, you will absolutely notice a difference of, morning erectile function when you're waking up.
Okay. Over how long?
So how long that lasts is...
how long do people notice? How quickly?
3 days to a week, you said.
Is that same?
Yeah.
Some people in a couple days. I usually tell people 1 to 2 weeks. Most within a week. If you're struggling with health, there can be any number of health issues. Your health isn't really dialed in. It may take 2 weeks because you're all the tissues involved have further to go to get back to homeostasis.
Okay. This episode is brought to you by PRX Performance, the best home gym equipment you'll find anywhere. Go check them out. Go to prxperformance.com/mind pump. You'll get 5% off on that link. Back to the show. One thing that I see is when you look up and research on just peptides, many of them are still used or prescribed medically in Russia. Like they'll prescribe C-Max for anxiety, C-Max for cognitive function, or Selenk for anxiety, for example. Like you go there, this may be a prescription that you get if you have cognitive decline, anxiety, whatever. They do this with other peptides. Are they prescribing bioregulators? Is that part of their medical system as well?
That's kind of interesting because I have a few contacts, in my personal circle in Russia, and that they're looked at least as has been explained to me. First off, to answer your question, they're entirely over the counter.
Okay.
The cytamins are largely ignored, from what I'm told. Like, oh, that's old, like 1970s stuff. Who cares?
Okay.
If they're used, it's more of the health optimization equivalent of the circles in the West, and those would more often be the cytogens.
Okay.
So that's one piece I didn't touch on before. I explained cytamins and cytomaxes. So cytamins are just essentially the bulk stuff. It's loaded with the direct bioregulators, but also larger molecules. The cytomaxes are purified down to, for the most part, just the pure bioregulators. And then Khavinson and other people took the research a step further and said that, okay, we have these larger amino acid chains, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, that produce this effect. But even when you do that, you're going to end up with a soup of these. So if you go through like lab level, super ultra purification, you may find when you're doing like mass spec and all this stuff that, hey, there are 5, 6, 7, 8 of these bioregulators that are coming out of a heart for a heart bioregulator. When you do the lab work, what they find with these, and this is to find this stuff, you have to go to Russian literature and translate it. It's another issue. It's not easy to go dig this up. But what they usually find is that 1 or 2 of them is producing something like 80% of the effect.
Okay.
So instead of having to go, it's a complicated process and functionally labor intensive to be like, I got to go collect, 5,000 hearts and extract all this to get enough to go sell on the market.
Got it.
Well, if I can just identify that one bioregulator, that one 5 amino acid chain that produces 80% of the effect, it is far easier and far more efficient for me to now just go to the lab and produce that bioregulator, that one specific one out of the 3, 4, 5 that produces the effect, the same way I would produce a peptide. You can do it on a machine, automated. So that's a cytogen, is that we identify this is the one that produces 80% of the effect, so we're going to make it entirely synthetically.
That's what I was just going to ask you. So they're not taking a bunch of cow hearts. They're actually making it synthetically.
Correct.
Wow, that's interesting. So here's how I see, because I love going on the internet, and bodybuilders are the best at experimentation. They're typically the ones that try things first.
Yep.
And I've been reading about bodybuilders using the heart bioregulators because of years of use of growth hormone and anabolic steroids. The fear being the enlargement of the heart, and issues like that. And they're saying this. I'm using this to help offset some of that. Is that an appropriate? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. The catch-22, from the Western perspective is, and you guys see this all the time. You talk about it on your podcast constantly, just because this is a Western view. Is show me the paper, show me this exact mechanism, that exact mechanism. They work. There's lots of Russian literature. Guys can verify pretty easily themselves via biological effect. So they do work, but they're slow and steady. And in the case of bodybuilders, is it going to completely counter that? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Because when you get into why are you getting an enlarged heart and other secondary cardiac effects from excessive, androgen cycles and things like that, you have a number of effects causing it. It's not just,
Right.
we'll say, cellular disruption of homeostasis. So they're helping that effect. People at that level using those compounds at those doses, you have other effects going. So it's a Band-Aid. It's not a Band-Aid. It's helping one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, but there's a lot of things happening.
Yeah, I liked where you were going earlier about being able to kind of check and see, like, especially with men's sexual health, like an actual effect and a feeling associated with this. I know as a consumer, it's kind of difficult to describe like bioregulators and their their benefit to them. Is there any other, like, so would you be paying attention to blood markers, and how often would you kind of check to see how things are working and benefiting you? Like, are there other types of indicators that you could pay attention to in different stacks that you might be able to like feel something and peer into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, for instance, there are human studies on bioregulators. They are on PubMed. Most of them are coming out of Russian institutions, which some people don't like, and that's their choice. But for instance, retinal bioregulator. There are human studies where, that showed improvement of a few different retinal conditions in a medical setting, medically measured. Another example is, and another confusion point of bioregulators. A lot, sort of like peptides. So for instance, BPC and TB500, they function through two core different pathways, but if you dig into the pathways they hit, they do overlap. They hit some of the same pathways, just to different degrees. Bioregulators can be the same. So certain amino acid chains can cause functions and be taken in by multiple tissue types. One example is bone bioregulator. So bone bioregulator is extracted from the bone marrow. So bone bioregulators will improve marrow function, which improves bone, but it also improves T cell function.
Because of the bone marrow.
Right. And it does also have other secondary minor effects in other immune-related tissues.
Would there be endurance boost because of that? Red blood cell production, anything like that?
Can be, but once again, the way to understand bioregulators, and I thought about this a lot actually before coming here, what's an easy way to communicate this is, and this is what I came up with, is think of it as 3 tiers. You have standard oral supplements, whether it's, magnesium or anything else, right? Then you have bioregulators, and then you have peptides. So each level is essentially a different level of intensity.
Oh, okay. So would a bioregulator be more like a light dimmer switch, turning it up or down depending on what your body needs?
Right. So to really go down this rabbit hole, I would actually redefine the common term optimization to a point, in that I would almost refer to bioregulators as optimizing compounds, because they're shifting the tissues they target back to your baseline homeostatic state. And then peptides would be
above and beyond.
So
are they good to use together?
Absolutely.
Okay. What are your favorite bioregulators? What are some of the reviews you're getting that people are like, oh, this one? I mean, you mentioned the male health one, because that's a very obvious sign. Are there any favorites among your performance-driven individuals or people who are looking for cognitive enhancement or anything like that? Yeah.
So I'll shift the sphere for that a little bit there. Promethean works with clinics to get them bioregulators, and one place that there are clear results by clinicians using this in the real world is actually with people undergoing chemotherapy.
Oh,
because chemotherapy is rough on your body. It has a huge impact besides just the cancer on your immune system, your cardiovascular system, and other areas. So there's a number of clinicians which are more open to these routes that have been using thymus, bone marrow, and blood vessel bioregulators.
Just more as a protective route?
Either protective or as post-chemo. It depends on when the person comes to them.
Okay.
Especially in the functional medicine world, people are usually coming after they've kind of given up on the mainstream. But they do have some clients who are like, yeah, unfortunately, the big C showed up. Like, we got to take care of this. So you can start it beforehand, and that's not going to prevent all the side effects of chemotherapy, but it's going to reduce the magnitude of them.
Okay.
Because now you have a mechanism, just think of a push and pull, right? In from a training sense, you have chemo pushing those functions down so they're not working as well. Bioregulators are helping balance by continually signaling the DNA to say, nope, stay in the homeostasis state and build and repair.
Yeah, and I did see some studies, again, Russian studies that show that they're anti-cancer cell proliferation in some of these studies with these bioregulators.
Yeah, so multiple bioregulators. All the studies I'm familiar with, they're basically like Petri dish studies in individual cells. But it makes absolute sense because what is cancer? Cancer is essentially derangement of a cell. It stops doing what it's supposed to be doing normally and goes off doing bad stuff that makes you sick and kills you, right? So if you look at Western technology, there are multiple Western therapeutic approaches trying to figure out how to tell the cell to go back to the healthy state.
Right.
Bioregulators do that. Now, bioregulators are not like, they're not like dropping an atom bomb on something. So you're not going to say, and I don't think anybody would ever claim bioregulators are going to cure cancer.
Right.
Highly unlikely.
Right.
But the mechanism is there, and it's been proven in labs that it does shift cancer. Well, it can shift some portion of cancer cells back to a normal, healthy state.
Okay. One of the bioregulators I'm interested in is the pineal gland one. And it's not necessarily because I know a lot about the pineal gland, aside from the, you hear people say things like the pineal gland is what gets you to, like when people take psychedelics, that's what opens up, or it gets calcified from water being, having too much fluoride in it or whatever. What do you get from using a pineal gland bioregulator? So your pineal gland goes back to baseline. What do you experience from that?
Is it affected by 5G?
Yeah.
You know what? That's a whole other conversation. If you look at studies, I mean, most brain tissue is going to be impacted by it.
Yeah. Good job, Dustin.
That's kind of a joke, but okay.
For derailing us.
Yeah, I don't want to sidetrack you.
Yeah. So the way to understand pineal gland and some of the other ones is you have your endocrine system. Pineal gland, it's kind of like the parathyroid. Pineal gland and parathyroid, like most people are like, what is that? Oh, I have that? I didn't know I have those in my body. But they're both critical to endocrine function.
Oh, okay.
So for pineal gland, and I'm not shooting it down. I'm just using the term. I mean, you can get into the more woo-woo aspects. How open are you to,
right.
the metaphysical space and all that? But without even having to get there, the pineal gland, and I'm throwing parathyroid in here because people are like, what the hell is that? Both of those are organs that play critical roles in multiple fashions in your endocrine system. So endocrine system ties back to everything. It ties to hormone levels, stress response, just including how you age, because all this stuff is actually, if you look at all the major signaling systems in the human body, the vast majority of them are all tied together through the endocrine system, through various signaling cascades. Okay. So another example is, this is an uncommon one. You have a middle-aged woman, a busy life, whether it's kids, work, both, everything, whatever else, and they can struggle with stress, and that cascades into hormone dysfunction, and it can cascade into endocrine dysfunction as well. So bioregulators, once again, are not going to fix those issues 100% on themselves, but I do private health coaching on the side. I use these with some people. I've absolutely seen an effect with a number of women I've worked with by having bioregulators on board. Okay.
I got to give you credit because, and I want to talk about your push patch, because NAD is all, the biohacking space loves talking about NAD. I've used NAD sub-Q, intramuscular. I did an IV. Never liked any of it. The intramuscular sub-Q, didn't notice anything. We did an IV. We actually had somebody come in here. They were trying to convince us to partner with them. And they gave us a free, massive dose of NAD. So we all sat here hooked up to these things.
For 3 hours.
And we were here for an hour and a half. I don't remember what it was. And I did not like it. My legs felt heavy.
Didn't sleep last
Didn't feel good. And then later on, I just didn't notice much of an effect, but there was an acute crappy feeling is what happened.
Yep.
I've used supplements that raise NAD, noticed nothing. I get nothing from them. Now, some people love it. Some people notice a difference. Zero. You have something called a push patch with NAD. That works for sure. I give that to my wife, myself, these guys in here. It's one of the few things these guys fight me over. Yeah. Oftentimes I take all the supplements home
legit.
Or whatever products. Those patches come in and we're like, perfectly dividing them because all of us notice a big difference.
All of us have personally reported back that we feel the difference in it, including our wives too. I mean, that's what she's always asking me to grab more because of that. Anytime I've been sick, it's become like part of the protocol to take that right away. And I swear it cuts it in half.
Oh, and then energy wise, I just feel, I'm not like stimulated like caffeine. I just feel good all day long.
We're like flying. You're getting on a 6-hour flight, and until I became part of Push Patch, helped develop the product, I'd get on a flight even for 2 hours. I would get off. I was in a brain fog for like a day.
Yeah.
I mean, I can fly to Europe now and get off the plane and be ready to rock.
So okay, so why do I notice a difference? Because now I've used because you send us stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And I've used it, I don't know, at least 20 times. My wife has used it just as many times. Why do I notice such a big difference with that versus even the IV? We got a massive dose. All of us were sitting here doing it, and I didn't like that. And yours with the pushback, I noticed. I felt great. What's the difference? So
to use a training analogy to keep it simple, and then we can dive in, more technical if you want, is I think you're going to do an extended training session, right? Okay. I'm going to go train for 4 hours, biking, running, lifting, CrossFit, whatever it is, right? Let's say you're going to drink a gallon of water over that 4-hour training period. Well, if I tell you to drink that whole gallon right now, any of us sitting here could do it, and it's not going to be fun. You're going to have a stomach ache, you might puke, or you're just going to be, I feel bloated. I'm not going to go lift now.
Right.
And okay, technically you're hydrated, but 2 hours into that workout,
dehydrated. The water's gone.
Dehydrated. Right. The water's gone. You're dehydrated, and now you probably have a stomach ache and all the other cascading issues of pounding that, gallon of water up front. If you go to the other extreme end, you have NAD sub-Q and you have oral supplements. So that's kind of like handing somebody, like the little paper cup, you see in bathrooms of water. Like
the dentist.
Yep. I'm not thirsty right now because, all right, that was a little drink of water. But, it's a quick hit. Like in 5 minutes, I'm going to be thirsty, and that's all the water there was. So, coming back to supplements, some people love it. My 78-year-old mother, they're awesome for her because, once again, it's situational. Somebody older, or somebody who's in a fairly poor state of health, that's enough to
make
a difference for them.
Oh.
For somebody who's younger or somebody who's very fit or optimized, your body already operates at a high enough level that's unlikely to make a dent in your natural production. Mm-hmm. So in the middle, the sweet spot is let's take that gallon of water and put it in like a hydration backpack with your little straw, and now you can sip on it pretty much consistently for the whole 4 hours. Now you're not thirsty, now you don't have a stomach ache, and now you stay hydrated the whole time. So if we translate that back to how does this matter to NAD, is as soon as NAD goes into your body, it can be degraded via a number of routes, a number of enzymes. So that's going on. And secondly, everybody thinks of NAD as mitochondria in the cell, energy. I know you guys know this, but what some people may not know is you actually have two pools of NAD. You have an intracellular and an extracellular. So you have NAD in the cell, and you have NAD outside of the cell. Now, that does a few things. That gives your body basically a reservoir and a way to balance, so it can pull stuff into the cell when it needs to. But NAD is also a signaling molecule for your immune system and for other functions. Essentially, think it's a little more complex than this, but think free NAD floating around in blood or bodily fluids. So we have a signaling molecule here. If I flood your body with that molecule, that also happens to be a signaling molecule, well, now you know why your gut's feeling like they're on fire, why you feel like an elephant sitting on your chest, and why you might puke.
Yeah. Because
we just disrupted the signaling molecules. Mm-hmm. Now, is it dangerous? Unless you were to do something really, really stupid in terms of an IV fusion, not dangerous. It's just not going to be fun.
It felt terrible. My legs felt heavy. it really felt weird.
I didn't really feel bad from it. I just didn't feel the effect of it.
I didn't feel good at all.
Yeah. I remember you complaining about it. I was just like, I didn't feel anything compared to the push patch. I feel it's wild, the difference.
So the other aspect of that is, and especially when you go to conferences and you get into the deeper ends of these circles, a common debate is, hey, cells cannot take NAD up directly. So this is a common debate around the precursors, NNM and NR.
Right.
Is cells can't directly take NAD up, so it's useless to just put NAD into your body. Well, first off, that seems actually wrong. There are, I know of 2 really cool studies they did with humans, IV infusion, measure urine, blood, all that to account for all the NAD possibly coming out of you, and then looking at tissue behavior. Long story short, what they found was that, and this was IV infusion, is that they didn't measure a rise in the blood levels of NAD until, I want to say, almost 2 hours into an IV infusion.
Okay.
When they do all the math and all the nerd stuff on that, accounting for urine or NAD breakdown products, they can't account for it. So that study shows that there are numerous pathways for direct uptake of NAD into cells that we just don't know about.
Okay.
We can't tell you what tissue, we can't tell you how we're doing it, but if you just do the math, cells can take it up. How much? It's a big gray area, but that just says that to say cells can't directly take up NAD is wrong. Okay. We can't say more than that, but we can say that some tissues, somehow, they can. The second piece is, yes, NAD gets broken down. It gets broken down into a few different fragments. And this is also where it gets interesting because you can do an NAD test, right? The finger prick test, and most of them are for intracellular NAD, how much NAD is in your cell. You have, I think, 1 or 2 that I'm aware of that are extracellular, how much NAD is just kind of floating around in your bloodstream and in the interstitial fluids. And they're related, but they also tell you different things. So when NAD gets broken down into these different fragments, most cells have transport pathways specifically for some of these fragments. So NAD gets broken up into Lego block example again. I get 10 Lego blocks. You break it up into 3 different pieces. Your cells have a way to bring each of those pieces in, and then it has another set of machinery to reassemble those pieces.
Okay.
Now, inside the cell, it may convert it to NNM. It may convert it back to NAD. It depends on the cell, what's going on, and other factors. But regardless of which path, you've still increased the bioenergetics of that cell.
Okay. And when I'm doing the push patch, it's doing a slow trickle for, what I think, was it 8 hours, 12 hours?
12 hours.
And so it's releasing a consistent stream of NAD throughout that entire period of time.
Yep, steady state. So essentially, think of it as a square wave, right? If you were to look at a dose curve picture, if you're doing an IV infusion, it's like a sharp pyramid, like straight up and then down. Straight down, right? With push patch, think almost like a picture of a table. Like ramp up is probably around 2 hours. The exact number is going to depend because it depends on skin quality, how you're wearing it, hydration, your electrolyte levels. But ramp up in most cases is going to take about 2 hours. So you're going to have your ramp up, and now you're just going to stay here you're actually going to stay there for longer than 12 hours. The reason it's over at 12 hours is it has a built-in battery because you're using a small electric current to push it. The battery runs out of power at 12 hours, and by default, it's turned off. But you've built up skin loading because during that first 2 hours, the area of skin and the tissue immediately under the skin were essentially getting super saturated. So now when the patch stops, that continues to diffuse into the blood. For how long? Maybe 1 to 3 hours.
So push patch, explain how it works. You just said there's a battery in there. So here's what, for people who aren't familiar with this, there is a battery in there. You put it on, you pull out a little tag, which I'm assuming creates contact with the battery. Yep. What's it doing? How's it pulling through the skin? So
the easiest way to explain this is think of a magnet, right? So if I have a North Pole, 2 magnets, and I take the North Pole and the South Pole, and I even bring them slightly together, they pull each other together.
Right.
If I take 2 North Poles, they push each other away. So you can do the same thing with an electric current. So when you start that electric current, and when we say electricity, you're not sticking your finger in a wall.
No, you don't feel anything.
You're talking a watch battery.
Okay.
So what happens is you start that electric current. One side of the pad is negative, one side of the pad is positive.
So it's going like this through the skin.
Now, not all molecules. The vast majority of molecules have a net charge, right? I'll give you an example. So people see NAD and they say, oh, it's positively charged.
Because it's NAD plus.
Right. The answer is it depends. It depends on pH. It depends on some other factors. NAD can, in certain conditions, actually has a net negative charge.
Okay.
So, this is some of the magic behind push patch is actually our formulation, getting into all the crazy formulation chemistry and electrochemistry behind that. But understanding how to control the charge state of the molecule you want and where to put it so that, like the magnets, if you have a molecule that's negatively charged and you put it on the negative side, it's going to be pushed to the positive. And the reason it doesn't go straight down is, think about a picture of a sunspot on the sun. You see the big arc of the sunspot. That's actually the same thing happening. The plasma from the sun is following the arc of the electric current. So what happens with any molecule used with iontophoresis is it wants to follow that arc. Now what happens is once it kind of gets halfway down that arc, think of a stream just flowing by. It's just going to kind of get swept off and your body's going to go do with it what it needs to do with it.
And our push patches, this is like a medical technology, right? Because this is also used. This has been researched and used for other delivery for other medicines as well, correct?
Yeah, that's actually the cool thing about it is
this isn't like you invented this technology. This is technology. This technology of transdermal. I don't know if that's the right term of application of medicines or molecules. This is a medical technology.
Yeah, transdermal is correct, and everything you said is correct. The cool thing about it is it's old technology. It's been around since actually earlier than the 70s. It goes, I think, all the way back to in the 50s. It was ugly, but it goes that far back. Basically, as soon as people were playing with electricity, like what happens when we put electricity on your skin? Oh, interesting things happen.
Right.
Now, once again, the electrochemistry is complex. And the skin is complex. So the challenge with iontophoresis, one of the reasons it really hasn't moved beyond a handful of niche applications in the medical industry or anywhere else, is because when you start getting into how do I formulate the molecule, it has to be stable in that electric field. It has to have the right charges. It has to be able to move with it. And it has to do all that while still being useful and stable once it gets into the body.
Got it.
So, we can do point A, iontophoresis. A fifth grader could do it as a grade school project. But you can use a needle and just put something in the body, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot going on in between those two steps, and it's not simple and it's not easy.
Okay. So in other words, this doesn't necessarily work with every molecule. It has to be the right one to be able to do this. Correct.
So Push Patch is working on developing a number of other products, including bioregulators. And a lot of times it isn't fast because you have to dial in all those factors to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
So in other words, the reason why a lot of people don't notice NAD is because they're not your body doesn't utilize it in one bolus or even a small dose. It kind of needs this consistent stream. Because like I said, it's the only NAD I've ever felt.
So that's actually a critical point we kind of skipped over before is, with an IV infusion, you suddenly have a massive dose of NAD. Yep, cells are going to take it up. Yep, it's going to help things. I'll give you an example. For addiction treatment, IV infusions I don't know if you're familiar with this. There's a number of clinics that specialize in this. They're so messed up from drug addiction. NAD IV infusions are like a miracle tool if used appropriately, just because they're in that much of a degraded state. But generally speaking, you dump this massive load of NAD into your bloodstream, kind of like you and me drinking water. Maybe you or I could drink a gallon of water in one sitting. We're going to puke if we try to drink two.
Right.
Body's kind of the same way. It can only use NAD so fast. And then on top of that, as NAD increases, cells have more energy to do more stuff. Now they'd like to have some more of it. But that one bolus is gone. It was here and gone. Now I'm ramped up. Now I'm ready to do more repair. I'm ready to do more neuron firing and thinking or training, whatever it is. Well, it's almost like a tease, right? Like, oh, that was like, you stop by and loan me your Ferrari, right? Like, here, Nick, you can drive my Ferrari for an hour. Like, oh my God, that was awesome. Dude, I want to go drive the Ferrari again. Oh, no, sorry, I took it home.
Okay. Is this only available because it's a medical technology, it's only available through prescription?
It is. We're working with some people. Hopefully we'll be able to have another conversation with more news about that before too long with you guys.
Okay.
But the device itself, so the actual patch itself, is a registered medical device and requires a prescription.
Oh, okay. Okay. Interesting. All right. I want to talk about GHK-CU again because now I'm seeing it being used in other skincare products. What's the amount that you guys are using with Entera? Because it seems to be much higher than some of the other ones out there.
Yeah. So, I call it the Amazon effect, right? Because
now everybody's.
Obviously, being the owner of the company, the founder, and the guy who makes all the products, have gotten comments, emails of like, hey, your product looks great, and hey, maybe I used your product and I love it, but I can buy something that looks like it's almost the exact same thing, makes all the same statements about it, for $15. So why am I going to pay for yours? Well, the answer is peptides in general are freaking expensive.
Right.
And I'll give you an example, and I'm not attacking any brands here. You can go to the top brands, and I've gone to all the big beauty stores with women multiple times, essentially, legit market research. Walk me through all the hot products. I want to know what to look at, which everybody loves, so I can look at the label. I look at the label, and what I do is, since I make this stuff, I know how much all this stuff costs. So either I'll buy it or I'll take a picture of the label, go back to my laptop, and say, if you dig into the research with most of the skincare peptides, you can look up a general range of what an effective concentration would need to be. Sometimes it can be a big range, sometimes it's a narrow range, but you can look up the range. And if you know what it would cost to buy the raw material, you can do a rough calculation. Well, if I say the minimum effective level based on the research is X, right? And I know that the peptide costs Y, well, now I can just calculate the cost of the peptides if I assume that each one is at the minimum effective level. And what you find in most brands, even the big ones, is that they would have to charge 2 to 3 times what they are for their product. Now, this can vary widely, but in a lot of the cosmetic space, a lot of products have a 5x to 10x margin, meaning that if it costs them $1 to make it, they're going to sell it for $5 to $10 for you to get it. So a lot of times I do the math, and some brands, you'll see that their price is maybe twice what the cost of goods are. Like you can't run a business on that.
Yeah.
So what that tells me right there, because their formulation is proprietary, nobody's going to tell me. But just by doing the numbers on the cost of the peptides and saying, I know minimum effective levels are this, well, I know most of these products, they have it in there. It's a legitimate claim. And I'm not saying it can't not help you, right? It can still do something. But to really hit that minimum effective level for a clear, obvious effect from that peptide and whatever its mechanism is, I'm not going to name potential competitors. I've only found 3 that even begin to get into that space.
Yeah.
This is what we speculated on.
Of course.
Was that because it's such an effective peptide that even little bits of it, some people might notice some sort of positive change, and so then they'll assume, oh, this must
it's
work.
It's better than their petroleum-based lotion.
Right.
But it's not going to be like because like the one you guys have, 1 or 2 applications you notice. Literally 1 or 2, and you can tell a difference.
Well, through some of my personal health coaching stuff, just to be blunt about it, I had a high net worth client I was doing health coaching for, and she knew about Entera, and she's like, hey, I don't like Botox. I'm having these issues. If I told you there was no price, could you make me something that would actually fix this? I was like, let me think about it and let me get back to you. Did a little bit of homework and get back, and I said, yes, but like the 1 ounce, 30 ml tubes that Entera sells our serum in, I said, that's going to cost you $1,500 per tube. And she's like, okay.
Done.
I'm like, okay, done. Made it for her. And she was like, it was actually wild. Like I would love to get pictures. Unfortunately, that's never going to happen. Yeah. But it just proved real world. And no, that's not economically viable for 99.9% of the population. But, depending on where your limits are, like to a point, the sky's the limit.
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah. So looking forward, what are you most excited about with this space? Is there anything cutting edge that you're excited about?
Or I would love just your business side, because you've got Push Patch, Entera, and Promethea. And which of the three are you most excited about? Or which has the most potential in your opinion?
I am really excited about all three. So I'll answer this in three
Of course, you wouldn't be doing them if you weren't excited about all three. Fortunately,
they've gotten to a point in life, kind of like you guys, where I get to do what I actually love doing. So, from a growth perspective, Push Patch is wild because NAD is legit, as you guys know, but the challenge is in the delivery of it so that it produces the greatest effect. And, realistically, since the beginning of this year, it seemed like the general public consciousness kind of hit that space of like, oh, NAD isn't some weird optimization thing just for gym bros. It's like, oh. And interestingly, where NAD is really seeming to blow up right now is in aesthetics.
Why?
For a couple reasons. Number one, for just market reasons. You can charge a lot for NAD, whether it's an infusion, an injection, whatever. But, so Push Patch goes to a number of the big aesthetics conferences, and we actually have a massive client base there because what you'll find if you use it appropriately is that when you get into the more invasive aesthetics processes, not just Botox, but, whether it's microthreading or, even like the more hardcore RF microsurfacing they do, which takes like the top 3 layers of skin off, your recovery, there are cases where it's cut in half. It's cut to 1/3 by putting on a patch the morning before the procedure.
Wow.
Because so a lot of the aesthetics procedures, for example, like RF, radio frequency resurfacing, and you guys absolutely know about this, it's essentially a good injury. You intentionally cause a certain type of damage to a tissue to stimulate it to repair and regrow. That takes a lot of energy to do that. So, hey, if I preload your system with elevated levels of NAD, guess what?
Yeah.
Now you're doing that way faster. And just think about it from both the customer side and the business side. So if a woman has done this before and is like, oh, dude, I'm kind of going to have to go hide for a week after having this done, but then I'm going to look like $1 million to, well, I look great in 2 days. Like, you're super psyched instead of once a year because I don't want to go hide for a week. Maybe I'm going to do 2 or 3 times a year.
Would it make sense then to use an NAD patch before a very strenuous competition or event? You can go do a marathon, triathlon, you're going to go do something crazy. Would it make sense to preload that way?
Oh, 100%. Like it is a legit performance enhancer without question. So my son plays soccer competitively. He was just over in Europe for a year. And, it's not banned. NAD is legit as far as I know. Colleges, universities, all that. Maybe that changes one day, but you can see it in his gameplays. Like watching his videos of when he hasn't worn one in a challenging game, or when he is, like you see him starting to get tired 2/3 of the way through the game. His reactions time is slowing down. He's not as fast. So he's wearing a patch. It's like just nonstop all throughout.
We just find it in our house. It's my wife and I. If one of her, me, or my son gets sick, the other ones patch up. Like that's like exactly what. As soon as one gets sick, the other ones are patched up right away. And either one keeps me from getting sick, or even if I do, it feels like it reduces it in half. The time and how
I've
hard
used it with lack of sleep. So like if I have really bad sleep and then I put it on, I'm like, I feel like I didn't get bad sleep.
So 2 points there. I definitely say. Once again, remember, for most people, it can take about 2 hours to ramp up to that steady state. But put one on and go do a workout 2 hours after putting one on. For me, realistically, I can go through a workout if I'm wearing one. And I kind of feel like I just did warm up. Like at the end, I'm like, maybe I should do another circuit. Like, I'm like, if I'm not wearing, I'm like, yeah, I'm tired. Time to go home. I'm wearing one. I'm like, no, maybe I should get some more sets in while I'm here.
Interesting.
The other side, and this is another common question, is, hey, Nick, in Mind Pump, you guys talked about 15 different things the patch is doing. How can it do that? It sounds like the ShamWow infomercial, right? A very legitimate question. And, you know, this one molecule can't do all these 27 things. And you're right, it doesn't. But what it's doing is it's increasing the available energy for every tissue type in your body, every signaling process in your body. So now every single one of those processes can work better. When people in your house are getting sick and you slap one on and it increases your NAD levels, your immune system just became more effective.
Yeah.
You know, if you're having a hard time sleeping, sleep is rest, repair, rebuild, right? So when you increase the energy, your body's now more effective. So one more step into that, a common challenge with sleep is cortisol, stress, and you get a cascade from that disrupts bioenergetics and neurological signaling. Well, by increasing NAD, now your body can be, that's good, but I'm going to kind of ignore that cortisol and do my job anyway. Now I can sleep.
Cool. So cool. This is great.
Yeah.
It's always good talking to you because you're always so deep on this stuff.
Dude.
It comes with gifts.
The NAD I noticed the most, and I've been using the Promethean, and it's been, I would say, 3 weeks. And it is subtle, but I think I can tell a difference, both stamina and recovery with those. But it's only been a few weeks, so
I mean,
I'll report back to you.
Thank you. I mean, if I can just kind of recap that, because I know it bounced around a lot, is, bioregulators, think of them as the step in between peptides and supplements.
Right.
They're going to help if you're already not at a, whatever your natural steady state baseline is, which if you're not fairly well optimized and trained well, just the nature of the world we live in, you're not going to be. They're helping you stay there. They're going to increase resistance to the stress and degradation of life, whether it's joints getting sore, how well is your cardiovascular system working, sexual health in both men and women, so on and so forth. One thing we didn't touch on that is an important point is bioregulators, like peptides, should be cycled. So,
I'm glad you brought that up.
You'll commonly see, you'll actually see a number of variations. So one common variation is if you have a problem system, do it 1 or 2 months, and then do that maybe once every 6 months. Some people, if you're really into bioregulators, and I've done this before, and after going through the series, that's when I noticed a difference myself. I just said, you know what? Let's just 1 month at a time go through every major organ system in my body.
Yeah.
And about 6 months into it, after being through several organ systems,
Go back.
like it was subtle, but I'm like, my baseline energy and like how tired I get in certain circumstances, like I can definitely notice a difference. Okay. But regardless, you could reasonably go, if somebody has a more significant health challenge on something, you could run them for 2 months straight. But just like receptors that peptides use, the how and the why and the where they attach to histones or DNA, any signal, like a little kid tapping you on the leg, hey dad, hey dad, hey dad. The first 5 times you're like, holy cow, like, yes, what do you need? After the 50th time, you don't feel them tapping your leg anymore. And you're like, oh, you needed something? So anything that's working with signaling in your body, even some supplements, right? Like look at ashwagandha. You could take ashwagandha, 1,000 milligrams every day, forever. At a certain point, it can actually start to have an SSRI-like effect of mood dulling because you're just hitting those receptors in the brain too hard that it's working with it. That's biology. Every aspect of biology is a cycle. So my personal opinion and what I kind of use as a mantra is whatever I'm doing, whether it's peptides, bioregulators, supplements, even and far better than me, training, right? You want to cycle how you're training because otherwise the muscle will adapt to that and become less responsive.
That's right. Awesome, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Man.
Bro.
Yep. Thank you,
Nick. Guys, it's always a pleasure, and I'm honored.
Right on, man.
Awesome.
All right, I know you liked that episode. If you did, check this one out. Shredded, ripped, defined, single-digit body fat.
Yes.
You want to get there? Let's talk about it.
Difficult. And is it worth it? That's a follow-up question.
Yeah. First off, we got to say that, okay, so single-digit body fat, obviously, body fat percentages that could be represented by one digit, like 3%, 5%, 6%, 9%. That's ripped for men. For women,
add 10%.
Yeah, exactly. You go up about